What are you angry about right now?
I'm angry about the mental health crisis in this country.
Okay.
I'm really, really angry about it. So we had a report in 2019, 2020, Hiaro Oranga, the Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry. That report was not groundbreaking because it was the first report we had on mental health that was commissioned by the government. We'd had 2 or 3 reports commissioned by the government on mental health before, usually, unfortunately, as a result of some really traumatic stuff happening inside the mental health system.
Yeah.
Why it was groundbreaking is because for the first time, it didn't pathologize, medicalize, or individualize the experiences of mental health in this country. So it didn't go, why is this person in this system? It said, what are the drivers of mental ill health? And it also recognized that addiction is one of the manifestations of poor mental health. And what it found basically, in the smallest nutshell I can give you, is that we are all born with different genetics that are informed by our parents and our grandparents and whatever else, and those genetics can provide us with a biological predisposition that is being more or less inclined towards the manifestation of mental ill health.
Yep.
But it is fundamentally our environment that can turn the notch up or down on the manifestation of those things. So the different environmental factors that were identified were a sense of community, a sense of meaning, a sense of identity, a sense of whakapapa, poverty, somebody's connection to people who are close to them. All of these things which I think we tend to look at in terms of, again, we still tend to individualize things, and we ask young people to reach out for help when they need it, but don't think about the systems that they may be reaching out for. So for me, we can't talk about solving the mental health crises in isolation, but also there's far too many people who right now are needing that ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and the money is not getting there.
Yeah. Run that back around the comment that you made around young people. And it, like a lot of people would take all those components that you talked about and go, yeah, those are kind of soft. They're kind of culture and connection and but there's a recognition here that they're actually substantial.
They are the hardest things out there. I mean, what is a person? Like, what is our experience of life? What is a family if it's not for those concepts of who we are and how we relate to each other? If it's not your sense of identity and who you are in relation to the rest of the world, if it's not that mirror that you hold up and see back yourself, who is that person and where does that concept or idea come from? So those cultural norms are hugely important, but I also don't want us to forget how important those structural supports are, because, this is the funny thing, right, is that ironically, we see playing out in research that even in a deeply unequal society, of course, we accept and anticipate that the people who are at the bottom are going to experience poor health, that is physical and mental health outcomes. But what we don't realize is that the people even at the top of that deeply unequal society are going to experience poor mental health. The reason for that is because of self-isolation from other people who are experiencing the world differently. You kind of create your own gated community and segregate yourself and have this immense amount of anxiety and fear about losing stuff all the time. You're not living or participating in a broader community. So that's why connection is so important, and that's why looking at those structural basic things like human rights to homes or livable incomes is so important.
Yeah, and so, what's your intent around being able to affect the type of change that needs to happen? So you said we need a better ambulance. I don't want to put words in, but a better ambulance at the bottom of the hill.
But we also need to do the fence up top.
Yeah. And so, and you also pointed out that report was the first one pretty much ever that looked at it through mental health through that lens and what were the things affecting that individual as opposed to everything else. So given everything that you've said about the types of change that you want to elicit, the role of culture inside of those change, when you look at the mental health system, then what is it in your view that needs to change?
So first and foremost, with regard to getting help to people who need it right now, we can fund community-focused groups, NGOs, those grassroots entities, and particularly those who operate in Te Ao Māori across the country who are crying out for the funding. We can give that funding to them right now. I don't understand what the barriers are between the government money that was put in place in 2019 budget that hasn't been rolled out there. So we can do that. That's first step. Deal with the crises as it is right now. Then there's that more fundamental restructure of who are we in relation to each other, and how do we ensure that everybody has the basics to be able to survive and live a good life. So those fundamental things ultimately become really political. Those are the things like, what does it look like to have a greater sense of equality? What does it look like to eradicate child poverty? Well, talk to anybody who belongs in an NGO that's been talking about child poverty for the past 10 years. They'll tell you that child poverty actually is a construct to help people feel empathy towards what is fundamentally whānau poverty. Because we are so used to blaming poor people for being poor, but no one can blame a poor kid.